morning and welcome to this November the 17th version of From Sunrise to Sunset with Pastor Gene. Today we're looking at Philippians chapters 3 and 4. So I hope you'll take some time to look through these chapters and then come back and watch the video. In this section of Philippians, Paul makes a play on two Greek words, katatomi and peritomi, which means to mutilate or to circumcise. He takes what could be conceived as a violent act and plays on it in a sacred way. Now, one of the things that most modern readers don't understand about Scripture is this whole thing about circumcision. In the New Testament era, there were a group of early Christian converts who really believed that in order to become a Christian, you had to do the Jewish thing first, which meant for males, you had to go through circumcision. Well, Paul didn't necessarily agree with that. Again, I'll be saying some things about legalisms throughout these videos and how they sometimes can become problematic, and they certainly were with the Judaizers. Went against the whole notion of justification by faith that Paul would really begin to lay out in some of the other passages we're going to look at. The sense of being superior that is talked about here in verses 8 through 10 is not a self-superiority, but one that comes about because knowing Jesus is getting to a point of being able to count our losses as gain, to being able to live thankfully in all things. And that's not an easy thing to do. That takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of moving beyond old ways of thinking into new ways of living. Old ways of thinking into new ways of living. He talks about how he hasn't obtained perfection, but he's running toward it because this continually must be the goal. If it's not our goal, then we will reduce the importance of trying to live a holy life, and ultimately will become what he describes in verse 18 of chapter 3. We will become enemies of the cross. Now you think about that for just a moment. What does it mean to be an enemy of the cross? Who might be an enemy of the cross? What would constitute that? I would hope that none of us would ever want to be an enemy of the cross of Christ. But instead, that we would do everything we could to try to live in to a Christ-centered life of faith and practice. Because citizenship in the kingdom, citizenship in the church, and citizenship in the world leads to citizenship in heaven. And as Paul says in chapter 4, verse 1, that's what we need to stand firm in. But there's a division that's talked about there in chapter 4 between Yoda and Syntyche, two women who've had a disagreement. And again, the push and plea is for unity. Verses 4 through 9 are some last advice about being generous and getting our strength from Christ and being kind to each other. And always remembering that these practices are more of the human nature than the divine. He closes the book in verses 21 to 23 talking about the friends and the saints and people from the emperor's household. That's an interesting conclusion to the book because it's a signal. It's a signal to the folks in Philippi that the gospel of Jesus Christ is now actually beginning to get into the hearts and minds of people in Caesar's palace. Not the one in Vegas, but maybe the one in Washington or Raleigh. And in this case, in Rome. The good news of Jesus Christ is that it brings it all together. And the book that Paul wrote, we call Philippians, is a call for us to live into the mind of Christ, united from sunrise to sunset.